Yeah, she just got married, so that's why
Okay.
her name is different on there. The March update. These are the cases that have been heard since your last planning board meeting. Again, Angela Van, Planning and Zoning Administrator. The following cases, the City Commission approved by 5-0 vote at their February 25th meeting. First case was a dock at 2830 North Flagler Drive. The applicant requested a waiver because the dock was 126 feet long. As you know, code only requires 100 feet long, so they waiver and the commission approved that. Morse Life and Home Safe's CSPD was combined. Morse Life actually purchased Home Safe property and combined it. This was a major amendment to combine it into one Morse Life CSPD. There's no development at this time. They did move a trailer, office trailer that they had to the Home Safe site. Next is Peggy Adams Rescue League. They came in for a major amendment for approval of an expansion, future expansion of about 29,000 square feet. Phase 1 for an adoption center shown here in red. And last one was Center Park, was for a 246 unit, 7-story multifamily development with the parking garage is actually wrapped with units. Commission approved that. These following cases were approved by the City Commission also by 5-0 vote at their March 11, 2019 meeting. 1309 South Flagler actually was approved. This was for 42 units. Waiver request was for the minimum acreage requirement, and there was waivers in relation to setback for the height. And this is what the final elevations look like, and the commission did approve this by unanimous vote. Drive Shack came back through for a major amendment. As you understand, they're under construction right now to increase the pole height. As you see, the poles that are up right now from 150 to 160. And the commission did approve that. JFK North ER plans to expand their emergency room facility and change the name to JFK Medical Center, and the commission did approve that. And the last one was IBIS RPD. As you can see, was expansion of the 16,000 square foot expansion of the clubhouse here, and also about a 10,000 square foot expansion of the fitness center. And commission did approve that. Any questions that you may have?
Okay, any questions of staff? If not, thank you, Ms. Van. We will then move to remarks by the chairperson, of which I have none. That brings us then to the declaration of ex parte communications. Does anyone have anything to disclose?
No.
All right. We now move into the public hearing portion of our meeting and the swearing in of speakers. Would everyone who plans to speak or offer testimony please stand up and raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this proceeding will be truthful? Yes. Thank you. Next on our agenda are continued cases, of which there are none. That will then bring us to Planning Board case numbers 1814, 18148, and 1814B.
Good evening, Planning Board members. Paul Grealick, Senior Planner for the record. So let's get right into it. This is a three-part request on behalf of Racetrack. The first is a voluntary annexation of a 1.4 acre parcel located at 2970 North Military Trail from the county into the city. The second is the approval of a future land use map amendment of said parcel to commercial. And then lastly is the rezoning of 2970 North Military to general commercial. I'll note right off the bat, there's two separate applications that are not before the board tonight. The first is an informal site plan review to redevelop the site as a 5,400 square foot racetrack. And then the second is a Class B special use permit to actually approve the use on this parcel. So just to reiterate, just these three cases on your screen are before you this evening. So first location, the city limits of West Palm Beach are indicated there in orange. The site is located on the southeast corner of Community Drive and North Military Trail, indicated in the star there. Drilling down a little further, we got our acre-and-a-half site there. It's just to the west of the Georgian Gardens Senior Housing Complex, which is under construction right now. It's to the north of Kaiser University, east of the Publix Plaza across Military Trail, and southeast of Oxbridge Academy. Some site photos get you situated. This is looking north on Military Trail and Community. You can see the existing conditions. It's a Shell gas station now. It's about a 720 square foot convenience store, 720 square foot car wash, and 4 pumps with 8 fueling positions, and a green space to the east of the site. So first, the annexation. As I mentioned, it's a voluntary annexation request. It's contiguous to the city limits, does not result in the creation of enclaves, and it complies with Chapter 171 of Florida statutes. Next, the future land use amendment. The existing future land use county commercial high 8, which means it's commercial with the ability to build up to 8 units per acre residential. The proposed future land use would be city commercial and with a 1.75 FAR, and I'll talk about the maximum development of each scenario right now. So existing, as I mentioned, is the CH8 county, allows up to a 1.0 FAR, maximum development potential about 64,000 square feet. Proposed would be a city commercial with a 0.75 FAR and about a 48,000 square foot development potential, and that results in a decrease of 16,000 square feet. Last is the rezoning. The existing is county commercial general, and the proposed would be a city general commercial. We notified the county and received a letter back on February 12th. They indicated no inconsistencies with the Florida statutes, and similarly, notification was sent to IPark on March 1st of this year. Staff is recommending approval of Planning Board Case 812, 812A, and 812B, and that concludes staff's presentation. We'll take any questions you
Okay,
have.
any questions of staff? Let me start on this side. Any questions?
No, not right now, thank you.
Okay. Mark, any questions?
No.
I just had one question. As a general proposition, property like this, assuming it's going to be improved and everything, isn't that generally a positive thing for the city to add? Does it increase the tax rolls? I mean, what's the general philosophy about annexation? I was curious.
Yeah, I mean, there's an objective in the comprehensive plan that encourages annexation to increase the tax base. So, and then it also opens up future opportunities to annex contiguous parcels. So
Okay.
it's looked at as a benefit to the
So
city.
all things being equal is something the city would normally want, correct?
sir.
Okay, thank you. Would the applicant wish to be heard?
Yes, sir. Hey, Paul? How do I get back to our, how do I escape out of yours? Thank you. Good evening. For the record, Harvey Oyer of Schutz and Bowen on behalf of Racetrack. And Mr. Chairman, to elaborate on the answer to your question, that's exactly it. It's a gas station today. It'll be a gas station whether it's in the county or in the city. So the city gets the negative impacts to the extent there are any and get no money if it's not annexed. If it's annexed, city gets the same impacts but money. So it's advantageous to the city. So you know the site, Paul adequately covered it. We're only in front of you for 3 of the 5 things that we will need from the city: annexation, land use, and rezoning, both of which, after we leave here tonight, go to the city commission twice. And if we're successful in being annexed and given the land use and zoning designations, then we'll go to the Zoning Board of Appeals for site plan approval and the Class B special use approval. These are the municipal boundaries of the city presently. We meet all the statutory requirements, contiguity being one of them, doesn't create an enclave. It does meet with the city's future annexation plan, and we have a letter of approval from the county allowing the annexation. Just to give you some comfort level that we're not trying to comp plan or rezone this inconsistent with the neighboring area, all of Military Trail is land use and zoned commercial presently, and that's what we would be changing from the equivalent in the county to the city's code equivalent, both for the land use and the zoning, very consistent with the entire Military Trail corridor. I just want to show you some existing site conditions and how our project will improve it. It's a rather large site, nearly 1.5 acres with some of it unused, but it's a pretty worn out, dated gas station and convenience store by today's standards. These are recent photographs, which not only is not aesthetically pleasing, but it's really not serving the needs that a modern convenience store and gas station would serve. This is the site plan. You're not voting on it tonight, but I thought you might be curious to see it. A lot more green space, a larger convenience store, more efficient, modern fueling stations. And this is what it will look like at completion. So we stand ready for any questions. I think this is probably a relatively easy one in the world of the planning board to
I'll
approve.
start on this side. Any questions of the applicant?
Is ownership changing?
Are you leasing this? We'll be leasing from someone who's currently. Okay, so it is under contract to a new purchaser, and we will be long-term leasing it from the new purchaser.
Any questions?
Why the zoning board? We're much nicer than the zoning board.
I would much rather be here, but that's what the code says.
Mark, has got any questions? Okay, thank you so much. Would anyone from the public wish to be heard on this matter? If not, we'll bring it back to the board. Is anyone in opposition to this application? And if not, I'll look for a motion for approval. Oh, okay, thank you. I'll look for 3 separate motions then. Who would like to begin?
Bunch of chickens here. Mr. Chairman, I'll move approval, case number 1814.
We have a motion, have we a second?
Second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously.
I move approval of case 1814A.
Second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously.
And I move approval of case 1814B.
Second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you. Let us proceed then with Planning Board Case Number 878M. That's also yours, Paul, right?
Okay, so on our second case, this is a request on behalf of TAMCAP 45th LC for a major PD amendment to expand the existing 2-story, 27,000 square foot building by 35,000 square feet and construct a new standalone 20,000 square foot office building at Lot 10 of Metro Center, 2400 Metro Center Boulevard. First location, it's a wedge-shaped 4-acre parcel located at the eastern end of Metro Center Boulevard. It's just south of 45th Street with direct frontage on I-95, great visibility. It's within the Metro Center commercial plan development. It's about 40 acres. Contains an interesting mix of uses. You got anything from hotels, medical professional offices, and even got a Cracker Barrel to the north. Metro Center was established in 1987. The office building on site was constructed in 1992. It was recently home to the Lincoln Culinary Institute, before that the Florida Culinary Institute, and since been vacant, so they're looking to repurpose it, find a new tenant, and update it. So some site photos to get you situated. This is looking north. You can see, with the exception of the office building, the balance of the site is really surface parking. You got some really nice mature landscape buffers on the sides that have given it a chance to grow. This is looking west, and you can see the frontage on I-95 with the visibility of cars passing by. This is looking east on Metro Center Boulevard. You can see the mature live oak trees on the buffer there, porte-cochere, and then as you enter the building, some nice touches architecturally. So the site and landscape plan, we have our existing 27,000 square foot office building. The expansion in red there, 35,000 square foot, is going to go to the south of the existing building. And the freestanding office building, 20,000 square feet on the northeast corner of the site. I want to commend the applicant. Right now, there's no sidewalks or any kind of pedestrian connectivity on this site. So what they've done is basically planned a network of sidewalks and crosswalks that will connect both the buildings, and then also have an accessible connection to Metro Center Boulevard. So we see that as an improvement. So elevations, this is looking east, and you can see the proposed expansion there in yellow one more time. And then the new building here, architecturally consistent. guess a Mediterranean revival style, and that's your front and rear elevations there. So the application went before PPRC in November, received concurrency in February, and notice was provided according to code. Staff is recommending approval of Planning Board Case 878, and that concludes my presentation.
All right, any questions of staff? Start on this end.
No.
Peter?
Oh, can you refer to page 17, Amendment 4?
I'm sorry,
Amendment 4 on page 17?
a staff report?
Yeah.
Okay. Are you looking at the standards or
No, a chart.
Is that attachment 4 or amendment 4?
Yeah.
attachment 4? or-
It says Attachment 4,
Attachment 4.
page 17.
Yes, the site plan?
So can you look down and where it says total parking provided is 448? Where does that number come from? Because there is no 448 on the site.
Probably cross-park with Belcan.
Yeah, I think, that number will need to be updated.
Okay.
But there was a overall reduction in parking when they did the new office building, so that was a positive. We don't have any parking cap in our code, so it's something we're working on.
Okay.
Any other questions, Peter?
No, that's it.
Any other questions on this side? Yes.
It's been here for a few meetings, and this seems to be a different format than I've seen in some of the others. Is it true that this is being built, and I'm going to just use words that probably there's a more technical meaning. You're not asking for a waiver or an amendment. This is just being built as of the current regulations?
Right, so in this particular plan development, they outlined a overall maximum square footage, which was 570,000 square feet. This petition exceeds that total, and there's also a small amount of vested remaining square footage that belongs to another lot. So the exceeding the overall total requires a major amendment by our zoning and land development regulations. Yes, sir.
All right, any other questions of staff? If not, would the applicant wish to be heard? Ms. Millard, did you want a larger sign as part of this? Just checking.
Mr. Maynes, how are you, sir?
Well, thank you.
Good to see you again. Chuck Miller at Keeling Horn. I want to thank Paul and Angela and Rick and their staff for helping us with this project. I think this is a good project, a good redevelopment, a good infill project. I'm not going to spend a lot of time and buzz back through our presentation, but the two questions that you did answer or ask, we'll double check that parking calculations just to make sure those are accurate. And yours was a very good question, Mr. Chase, in that we initially filed this application as a minor amendment. And Paul was accurate and right on point with his explanation that there's a certain amount of square footage in the original PCD that was approved and unbuilt. By this addition of the 35,000 square feet to the existing building and the 20,000 square feet to the new office building, we exceeded that threshold. So we're before you today because we did exceed that limit, and that triggered us and pushed us into the major amendment. So we're here to answer any questions. Again, thanks, staff. We think this is a good project. It's a good redevelopment. It's a good adaptive reuse of the site. We're here to answer any questions.
All right, any questions? Chris, let's start with you. Oh, that's fine. Okay. Any questions? All right, thank you, Ms. Millar.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. Would anyone from the public wish to be heard on this application? And if not, we'll bring it back to the board. Is there any concern on the part of the board on this application?
Just have one comment. Steve, yeah, this is excellent, but just so you know, when Belcan moved into the building to the southwest, apparently 13 of their cars were broken into within the first week of their occupancy of the new building. So additional activation, additional pedestrian connection, this all seems good, but the city has to be aware that, that there's a property crime issue. And we took a lot of energy moving Belcan from City of Palm Beach Gardens to the City of West Palm Beach, and it's a little bit of pie in the face to have this happen in the first week for them across the street.
Understood, thank you. Any other comments? If not, I'll look for a motion. Oh, Deborah's going to do it.
Mr. Chairman, I move for approval for Planning Board Case Number 878M.
We have a motion for approval. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, next on our agenda is Planning Board Case Number 1242G. And Mr. Roach?
Good evening. For the record, John Roach, Principal Planner for the city. The item before you is with regards to what was formerly known as Sail Club at Clear Lake. It is a planned development, so this application before you is a major amendment to that existing RPD. They are proposing to rename it to Clear Lake Estates. So that'll, if approved, that'll be part of the actual amendment to the development order. We'll change the name. But they are also proposing a new residential project on the subject property, so I'll go through that. The site is located at the southern terminus of Executive Center Drive, consists of just under 11 acres, and it's entirely vacant at this point. A little bit of history about the site is that in the 1970s, a residential project known as Lake Point Villas was built on the property. However, that project was demolished after numerous years of decline. But even while that project was still there were a couple renditions of a redevelopment that were proposed. The first being in 1999, Executive Point Villas was proposed to be constructed on there, consisting of 590 units. That was approved with the ordinance that you see there. There was an amendment to that approved in 2000 that dealt with facade changes and so forth, but still pretty much the overall project was the same and as that approved the year prior. But then in 2005, they scrapped the Executive Point Villas project and proposed Sail Club at Clear Lake, which was again 590 units, but a different configuration of high-rise as well as the additional townhomes and loft units and so forth. Again, that was approved in 2005. However, there were several conditions to that approval, and in addition to the passing of time in accordance with our zoning and land development regulations, all of those entitlements had expired. So the site sits vacant, has no entitlements on it. It does still have the residential plan development zoning designation, so therefore any new development proposal that comes before you requires a major amendment, hence the application this evening. So with new ownership acquired in 2015, the applicant is coming forward with a new project consisting of 4 buildings, all of them being 8 stories in height, a total of 352 dwelling units, so significantly less development than what was previously approved. No waivers in terms of density and so forth, as they are proposing to comply with the code at this time. You can see the elevations of the 3 buildings that front onto Clear Lake here in your image that's on the screen. And with regards to the site plan, you can see the 3 buildings that I showed previously fronting onto Clear Lake with their amenities along the lakefront. An additional building internal to the site surrounded by a number of parking spaces, but also a significant amount of green space, landscape area and so forth. And then the construction of 2 parking decks. These are single-story parking decks over at-grade parking. So it's not a multi-level garage, it's just one additional floor of parking above at-grade parking. And these occur at the north and south end of the property. The project actually complies with all the city's zoning and land development regulations with the exception of 2 waivers that they are asking for, and I'll go through each of those. First is with regards to the amount of required number of parking spaces. Currently, our zoning and land development regulations require 721 spaces based upon the bedroom count of the configured project. They are proposing to construct 615 spaces of that, thereby requesting a waiver of 106 spaces or 15%. Our zoning and land development regulations do allow planned developments east of 95 to request parking waivers, subject to meeting certain criteria, one being that it not exceed 15%, and 2, that they provide parking studies, which was included within your staff report and so forth. But more importantly, I want to talk about some of the things that they are proposing to do to offset that reduction in parking. So they are proposing 2 things. One is the construction of the Clear Lake Trail, which was formerly known as the Turquoise Necklace. and has actually been in the city's comprehensive plan and other various planning documents for a number of years. So as part of this approval, it will be conditioned that the developer who constructs this project would be responsible for that portion of the lake trail that fronts onto their project adjacent to Clear Lake. This is important because it'll actually tie into a city-funded project, grant project that we're looking to move forward with in the next few years that would tie this side of Clear Lake to Okeechobee Boulevard. In addition to the fact that there is a portion of the Clear Lake Trail that is already constructed farther up near Palm Beach Lakes Boulevard. Those have kind of been done in a piecemeal approach as projects have come in, but there's no continuity between them. So with the grant project, we're looking to make that, fill in those missing connections. This would actually provide an alternative mode of transport from this portion of the city to downtown without having to get onto Congress, Executive Center, Okeechobee, or any of that. They would be provided direct pedestrian or bicycle access via this trail. So by having the developer construct that portion, it's that much more that the city is relieved from and can invest in other portions of the trail. In addition to that, we are proposing, and this is actually a carry forward from the previous project, that they would build a publicly accessible connection from Executive Center Drive to the Clear Lake Trail across their property, dedicate a public access easement that's at least 20 feet in width that would cover the width of the entire trail, and that would be open to the public 24 hours a day. So anyone living on Executive Center Drive who's normally cut off from the Clear Lake Trail because of private property would be able to access the trail directly through this pathway across the development that you see this evening. You can see a cross-section of what that trail typically would look like. We're still working through the language that we would incorporate within the development order as to how the developer will be responsible for this, but the concept of them being obligated to complete their portion, they are on board with that. The second element, I talked about the connection to Executive Center Drive, but they are also continuing to work with Palmtran to improve some of the bus shelter or the existing bus stops that occur along Executive Center Drive, the installation of a bus shelter at the existing location, or potentially relocating the bus stop onto their property so that they can provide that shelter, all with the efforts to enhance alternative modes of transportation in exchange for the reduction of the parking. And then also, similar to what we did with Center Park, is that we'd like for the parking spaces to be unbundled from any lease or deed. That way a person is only paying for the parking space if they're actually using the parking space, as opposed to, you renting a unit, you're given a parking space regardless, and that amount, the cost of that is associated with your lease. So we'd like to keep those unbundled, and they've agreed to do that as well. The second is with regards to setbacks within residential plan developments. There's a separate provision. Normally we just follow the underlining zoning, but there's a separate provision that deals with the outermost perimeter of planned developments, and it states that residential buildings have to be a minimum of 20 feet from the outermost perimeter. Non-residential buildings have to be 40 feet. They comply with all of those with the exception of the parking garages, or parking decks, excuse me. They are proposing to construct the north parking deck at 25 feet from the north property line and 20 feet from the south property line, and thereby necessitating the waivers. So you can see these two areas in which I've outlined. These buildings would actually meet code if they were built according to the underlining zoning or a normal zoning district. It's simply because it's a planned development that the additional setbacks are required. In our review of it, based upon the landscaping and so forth, we feel like that the impact of these structures on adjacent properties is negligible, and therefore we don't have any objection with the proposed waiver request. The applicant did receive traffic concurrency in August of 2018 and school concurrency of May of 2018. Those are still valid. And staff is recommending approval based upon compliance with section 94-32. I talked about the Clear Lake Trail, so this is one condition that we'd like for the board to add in to those conditions that were included within the staff report. And again, that's with the caveat that we're continuing to work with the developer as to the exact language that will be incorporated into the development order. Whether it's the developer actually obligated to build it or do a payment in lieu of or what have you. We're still working through that, but the concept being that they would be obligated to fund or construct that portion of the path. So that concludes staff's presentation. If you have any questions.
Any questions of staff? I'll start with you, Peter.
John, my compliments, I think, to the applicant on the choice of architectural expression for the site. I think it's a very nice approach to the site, and what I really like, finally, is that it starts to pay attention to pedestrians crossing the main thoroughfares by putting pedestrian pathways connecting all the buildings, and I like that feature.
Yeah, we actually made significant improvements from the first rendition of this project, and that created the construction of this public, or not public, but open space between the buildings, a lot more enhancement of pedestrian circulation and so forth. So that was a certain improvement as we evolved with the project. So.
Right. Mark.
I have a question regarding the parking study. I don't know if that'd be more appropriate for you or for the applicant.
Oh, why don't you pose it to him, and then when the applicant has a turn, we'll give the applicant a chance to answer as well.
So I reviewed the parking study, and because I would admit that at first I was a little concerned about the waiver on 15% of the parking. But the parking study did seem compelling, but I was curious as to how they selected their methodology and how they selected because they observed it over 2 days, and they picked a Thursday and a Sunday, and I'm just curious how they picked those days, and are those typical for this type of study?
I mean, I'll let the applicant select or respond to why those specific days, if he's able to answer that.
How many days are available?
You know, I think they were looking at 2 different times of the week. They also chose projects that were comparable in nature to the one that is proposed here. And also, one that had similar vacancy or occupancy rates in which you would experience on this type of project. So they were really trying to compare apples on apples and then look at a couple different times during the week to see how those existing projects behave in terms of the parking demand. So, but, if they can offer any additional information.
Okay, any further questions of staff before we hear from the applicant? And if not, thank you. Would the applicant wish to be heard?
Good evening, Mr. Chair, board members. Josh Nichols with Schmidt Nichols for the record. Just like to thank John again, as always, doing a great presentation. And also, as he mentioned, with some of those improvements that were made, there was an entire redesign of the site up front to provide that extra green space and kind of provide the views that we're seeing on this layout. So just to answer that parking question, so that's the typical, so there's the ITE manual, and again, I'm not a traffic engineer, so, but there's an ITE manual that kind of sets the national standard for the parking requirements, so about 1.22 spaces per unit. But the reasoning for the Thursday and the Sunday is based on, again, the national standard where you're getting the most people that are either on shift duties for their work, and also Sunday being a day when the most people are going to be at a site. So people are typically mostly off work, so you're going to see the maximum amount of cars on that site on a Sunday. So they just do, and then they pick a middle of the week just to kind of balance that out. So that kind of answers part. And again, the code allows for a 30% waiver for this, and we're going for the 15. So it's kind of in concert with what we've been seeing on other projects. So hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Are you here to answer questions? You want to make a presentation?
Yeah, I really can't add anything to what John did.
I do want to follow up on his question because I had some of the same concerns. Let me just say on the outset, I agree with the efforts we've been making to try to reduce unnecessary parking, and I very much like the walkway. So I'm like an agnostic who wants to believe. I'm just not quite there. Are you confident that much reduction? I mean, because obviously you want your project to succeed. Are you confident with that much reduction in parking, you're going to be okay? It's going to work?
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay. This is what we've seen on several other projects we've done. We just actually, at the county level, so their requirement is about 2.25 spaces, and we went down to just 1.75, and that was the largest parking variance they had ever seen at the county. So you're starting to see this progression.
So we are.
And, I think this is right in the sweet spot, so I think it is. And again, we don't want to have a project that would fail, so.
I understand that. All right. Any other questions of the applicant?
This might be connected. You were talking earlier about unbundling. So could you help me understand from your point of view the pros and cons of unbundling? I can understand that the pro is that you aren't holding spaces for people who don't want them. I get that part. But isn't there also a problem that arises when someone someone takes that spot, and then if the unit turns over, that spot's no longer available to the person that moves in?
So the purpose of the unbundling is to incentivize those who actually do not have a car or who have alternative modes of transportation, because then they're not obligated or they're not assigned a parking space that they would otherwise not use. So therefore, that allows you to bring your number of parking spaces on the property down, because if you have, 50 people that don't have a car, don't want a car, and use alternative means, you're not providing 50 parking spaces for those individuals and unit owners. So that allows you to bring the overall number down. By unbundling, yes, there has to be some management at the association level and what have you, as far as who's assigned what spaces and things like that. But it also offers flexibility in the sense that a parking space can be utilized by different individuals because they're not assigned to a specific person. So, a parking space, I could be parking in one space, one day, and a different space another day, and they're in a constant rotation. So that allows the flexibility, because we all, as Josh mentioned, you have people working at different times during the day or what have you, so it allows that turnover, and therefore, again, the overall demand on parking spaces is reduced.
There's a more efficient use of the parking.
It's a more efficient, it's a more flexible use of it, as opposed to, a regimented of this space is assigned for this tenant owner, whether he's using it or not. It allows you to provide that flexibility.
Thank you for explaining that to me. My last question is, and therefore it's only people who live there are entitled to have a parking space? It is contained within the residence?
The parking, it is not a public parking lot, so it's only available to that private development. And actually, they're having gated access into the site. So only those who live there or who are, guests who are acknowledged by existing residents can get into that site.
If I can just ask one more question of the applicant. So how much of the parking that is in your plan will be dedicated to visitor parking, percentage-wise? I mean, if you could just ballpark it.
I don't think, let me see. We have 32 units, or 32 spaces. So the guest is a breakout of 1 space per 10 units. So that's 32 spaces. But at any given time, you're going to have more or less, again, that flexibility of the use of the parking in there.
So they won't be specifically dedicated, like, painted a
Correct.
different color,
Correct.
signed somehow. I see.
Correct.
Okay.
And if you notice, it's kind of difficult to see, but in front of each of these buildings is a drop-off zone. So that's provided more, as we're seeing this transition away from the autocentric kind of world, we're seeing Uber drop-off. So we envision that as kind of an Uber pickup drop-off location also for their guests, or someone's, dropping person off there. So those were added to the plan as well.
Good. All right, any other questions of the applicant? If not, thank you, sir. And anyone for the public wish to be heard on this application? And if not, we'll bring it back to the board. Is there general consensus in support of this? I personally think it's a good-looking project in a part of the city that has struggled. So,
It's been vacant for so long.
I know.
The turquoise necklace is also a really nice feature.
Very nice, very nice. All right, I'm looking for a motion for approval then. Excuse me, we have to add the modification, is that right, Mr.
The
Thomas?
waiver says.
Waiver, excuse me.
All right, Mr. Chairman, I move approval of case 1242G, inclusive of 6 conditions and an additional condition of item 4.3 dealing with the walkway construction terms, and the 2 waivers.
Mr. Thomas, did that cover appropriately the motion? And if so, I'll look for a second.
Does,
You look unpersuaded.
does anyone have any questions or objections as to the waivers?
No.
So we have a motion. Do we have a second to the motion? Motion and second. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? It passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, planning board case number 1399R. Mr. Schneider.
Good evening. For the record, Eric Schneider, Principal Planner. And as stated, this is case 1399R. It's a Sedona Commons commercial plan development. It's a major amendment. Sedona Commons is located on Okeechobee Boulevard at the southwest corner of Okeechobee and Benoist Farms Road. The plaza, you can see outlined in white here, has a number of different uses: a bank, a retail building up front along Okeechobee, a new building that's being filled now with a daycare is outlined in red, and then some office buildings that were there when the project was annexed into the county, into the city from the county. So the subject of this application is the daycare would like to put in artificial turf as their play surface for their play area, which artificial turf normally requires city commission approval through a Class A special use permit, but because this is a planned development, which doesn't, you don't go as a Class A, you would go as a major amendment to the planned development to get the city commission approval. So the turf area, hopefully you can make it out here in green on the left side of the building, west side of the building, is where the play area is. What's currently there now is a sodded area that is a utility easement. So there's, it's pretty much the setback from the neighboring building, as well as they couldn't even put the landscape buffer against the property line. I'll show you this in the next picture. The landscape buffer is against the building because of that utility easement. So this area, the applicant wishes to do the artificial turf. If they wished to do it as a rubberized play surface, they would not need to be here. They could go straight to building permit, but they want to go with the artificial turf because of the feel of it for the kids, and it doesn't get as hot, so forth and so on. So the turf area is actually about 20 feet wide by 290 feet long. That's the play area. And then the only sod will be removed, no trees or other shrubs. The landscape and pervious requirements, minimums, are still met for the entire development. And the turf will comply, and they've provided evidence of this, and it will be checked again at building permit with all of these standards that are outlined in the city's zoning and land development regulations for artificial turf. So where's it going to go? So here you can see the edge of the building. That's the west edge of the daycare building. And you can see trees along the landscape buffer. It's a 5-foot wide landscape buffer up against the building. It kind of doubled as a landscape buffer and the foundation planting on this side of the building. Those trees you see on the right-hand side against the driveway, those are actually the landscape buffer of the neighboring property. That's their 5-foot landscape buffer. So as I mentioned earlier, that entire green strip there is a 10-foot wide utility, or excuse me, a 20-foot wide utility easement. I know the scale looks a little off from the perspective here, so it does look really, really narrow, but in plan view, you can see it, and I've seen the building permit plans for the playground and stuff, so it does work. They can get stuff in there in a couple different segregated play fields. So it would start a little bit further back from probably about where you see that first tree on the right-hand side, and then run down, as I said, about the distance I said, about the 800 feet or so. Pretty simple, straightforward application. Meets all the zoning requirements. So if you have any questions of me, I'm here. The applicant is also here.
I have one question. Just what's the city's view about artificial turf generally?
It's gone, looked at from different, depends on the scenario. We used to not allow it at all. And then we allowed it in certain situations. It was actually Rybovich, I think, was the first one that it was opened up where it could trade out as long as you still met, as long as you could, if you could pave the area, then you could put artificial turf on the area for certain situations, and they have some play areas, and it's listed in the code. Most of those allowances, at least on non-residential properties, require you to get city commission approval. There are some provisions for the backyard of single-family homes where if you're not, if you have to be set back so far from the property line, and you can put it in. There's also standards of what the artificial turf has to be made out of. Can't have lead in it. Can't it has to be able to be recycled. Blah blah blah. So it has been looked at if it's behind areas, and in this case, one of the commercial things does require you to have a solid fence around it, so you can't see it from the right of way. The nature of the daycare regulations require you to have a solid fence around your play area. So this will meet that requirement. So that's really where we're at with the artificial turf right now. Residential in the backyard, also screened, but has to get city commission approval for any non-residential property. So that's why we're here for this. You saw when I took the Kaiser University sports arena through, stadium, they are going to go eventually to artificial turf. They had to get special approval from the city commission to use the artificial turf. So, and they also meet all the other standards, or will, when we verify what they're putting down.
And did I understand correctly that you said if they wanted to use that rubberized, whatever, surface, they could do that without any special approval?
Correct, because they aren't exceeding their, or aren't going below their minimum landscape on the site. They're not going below the minimum impervious surface or pervious surface requirements. As an example, we'll use Palm Beach Day Academy, which you guys saw a few years back. Their play area is using the rubberized surface. Across the street, when they went in, the Renaissance Charter School, across the street from this site, came in with a rubberized play surface as well. So, and those are just straight to code. I mean, they're putting them over a concrete base, or at least some kind of base, which is not pervious. And so we have to look and do the analysis as if that's just a concrete basketball court, but it's actually a play surface. So,
And from the city's perspective, do you have any preference vis-a-vis that rubberized stuff or artificial turf? Is there any, from the city's perspective, any advantage or disadvantage of one over the other?
from this perspective of looking at I mean, as long as it meets the, doesn't exceed the impervious surface calculations on the site, and the drainage is handled on site, there's no difference really between that or concrete. I mean, I know my son's school they have on their play area, it's the wood chips. So it's a little different situation. So, I mean, there's all those options open. However, we haven't gotten to where this is something that is automatically accepted and doesn't go to city commission. That would be something the city commission would have to direct staff to say, we don't want to see these. And maybe I'll hear it when I go. I don't know. So,
All right, any other questions of staff? Yeah, go ahead.
Eric, so does the code require that artificial turf to be permeable?
Yeah, got me on a good question there. It does have to be put on a certain base, and has some drainage requirements of it. It's not necessarily permeable where it drops directly into the water, but it has to drain so there's no standing water. It can't be that what you think of as back to indoor-outdoor carpet that you had in the house. A lot of us had when we were younger. So.
Okay, any other questions of staff? Thank you then. Would the applicant wish to be heard?
Good evening. Brian Donahue with Insight Studio for the record. I do have a presentation. I don't know if I need to bore you guys with it, so I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
We appreciate that. I think if we were sensing opposition to this thing, we really want to give that opportunity, but I'm not sure there is. So any other questions of this applicant? If not, we thank you for your brevity.
Thank you.
Okay. Would anyone from the public wish to be heard? And if not, we'll bring it back to the board. Does anyone have any concerns about this request? If not, I'll look for a motion for approval.
I move to approve Planning Board Case 1399R.
We have a motion. Have we a second?
Second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you. That brings us into Planning Board Case number 1670.
Good evening, Linda Louie, planner for the record. This is an application for a major PD amendment to the Palms Gateway Commercial Plan Development. The request also includes the plans for the approval of a 14,000 square foot Mitsubishi Motor Vehicle Sales and Service Center. The Palms Gateway CPD is 8.84 acres in size, and it's located at the southeast corner of Belvedere Road and Australian Avenue. The CPD is divided into 4 separate development tracts. To date, site plan approvals have been granted for 3 out of the 4 tracts, specifically a Wawa gas station and convenience store on track number 1, which construction was completed back in 2017. There's a 5-story self-storage facility that's currently under construction on track number 4. And last year, the Del Taco fast food restaurant with drive-through was approved on track number 2. Uses surrounding the property include commercial to the north, a used auto dealership to the east, vacant land to the south, and the Drive Shack entertainment complex that's currently under construction to the west. So this amendment is seeking approval for the construction of a 14,683 square foot Mitsubishi Motor Vehicle Sales and Service Building on track number 3 of the CPD. Track number 3 is located at the southwest quadrant of the PD, which is the last remaining developable track within the plan development. The site plan features over 30,000 square feet of outdoor storage, a new sidewalk along the northern boundary of the property to facilitate pedestrian cross-access to the adjacent parcels. There is an internal pedestrian crosswalk leading to the entrance of the building that's also provided, extended landscaped areas along the eastern boundary, and sufficient parking has been provided for the project. So this is the proposed landscape plan. The landscape for the project meets the minimum landscape requirements for the plan development. These are the architectural building elevations, and these are the architectural renderings. So a minor change will also be made to the approved master development plan, which establishes the development concept for the overall PD. The changes that will be made to the approved document is the use on track number 3 for consistency with the proposed use. So just to provide a little bit of history, track number 3 was previously approved for a hotel use on site. However, the developer wasn't able to secure a tenant. The tract was subsequently purchased by the applicant with the intent to redevelop the site with a motor vehicle sales and service center. And that use is a permitted use by right in the underlying general commercial zoning of the PD. The last change to the PD is to the approved master freestanding sign program, which sets out the number of freestanding signs permitted, as well as the location of each freestanding sign within the PD. The applicant is proposing a fifth freestanding sign within the development on track number 3 for the Mitsubishi dealership. The sign will be located at the southwest corner. Staff has no issues with the new monument sign. It is consistent with the sign regulations for the general commercial zoning district. In terms of project review, the Plans and Plats Review Committee did review the application back on September 19th of last year. The PPRC had no comments and deemed it sufficient to move forward to a public hearing with conditions which are outlined in the staff report. And the project also received traffic concurrency approval from the county back on February 13th of this year. So based on staff's findings, staff recommends approval of Planning Board case number 1670J with conditions because it complies with the amendment standards of our zoning code, section 9432. The conditions of the application are listed on page 2 of the staff report. One minor change to the condition, and that's to condition number 1, which was requested by the applicant. And this is for the modification of the drainage system for the overall PD. Basically, per the declaration, the applicant is required to notify and get approval from the POA for any changes made to the drainage system. The original condition stated that the documents had to be provided to city staff prior to final site plan approval. However, the applicant is requesting that this be changed to prior to building permit issuance. Staff has no issues with changing this condition to prior to building permit issuance, and therefore we don't foresee any issues with this. And that concludes staff's presentation.
Okay, any questions of staff? Let me start on this end. Scott?
Thank you.
Mark? Peter?
No. Condition number 3, art in public places. Could you elaborate on that one?
Okay, so per the city code, in order to encourage art in public places within the city, this is a standard for any new development within the city that incurs over $750,000 worth of construction that they provide to the Art in Public Places Fund to projects throughout the city, public art projects through the city or on site. You can contribute a 1% to this fund.
What is 1%? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Any other questions of staff?
So
1% of the cost of construction of the project. Yes, yes.
All right, if there are no other questions of staff, do the applicant wish to be heard?
Again, for the record, Josh Nichols with Schmidt Nichols, representing the applicant. We're in agreement with the conditions and staff's recommendation of approval. Thank you again, Linda. I don't have a presentation on this, so I'm just happy to answer any questions you may
Any
have.
questions of the applicant? And if not, we thank you. Would anyone from the public wish to be heard on this application? If not, we'll bring it back to the board. Has anyone had any issues with what's been requested? If not, I'll look for a motion.
Just one comment, Mr. Chairman. So just to take this into historical context, I mean, this site was a brownfield and vacant for so long. So all this development, none of this is exciting, and it's still 1950s auto-centric, corner, but this is still better than what it was. So we have to put it in that framework.
I appreciate it. All right, I'm looking for a motion.
I move that we approve Planning Board case number 1670J.
We have a motion, a motion and second. All right,
We got to amend
First condition.
first condition.
you have, remember the one change, would you amend your motion?
Final site plan deleted and put in the words building permit issuance.
And I think the motion also has to be amended to include all of the conditions.
So the motion amended by the conditions that are set out in the report?
No,
Right.
just amend the wording on condition number 1.
I think Scott's points will take into. So number one, we need to include.
Why don't you help me out?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And then secondly, one of those has to be rephrased, just those 3 words. Up there, you see it on the screen there, and on your TV screen?
Right in front of you.
Okay.
Right in front of you, right there, sir. Chris is right in front of you, too.
Subject to amending the language to prior to the building permit issuance. Does that work?
Do we have the conditions? We still, why do you suggest?
Yeah,
that?
if I could suggest, I would suggest that we amend the motion to approval of Planning Board Case 1670J with the conditions, 3 conditions set forth in the staff report, amending Condition 1 to read prior to building permit issuance as opposed to prior to final site plan approval.
See, there's a lawyer talking.
Do you
Thank
accept?
you for helping me with that.
Do you
That was great.
do you accept those
I
changes to your
accept those
motion?
changes.
And do you accept, does the second accept the changes?
Yes, I do.
Okay. The motion as amended has been seconded. Is there any further discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It passes unanimously. Thank you. For what it's worth, I'm more confused than you, what I'm thinking. Just so you know, you're not alone in that. All right. I think we're down to our last.
Yeah, we're outnumbered 3-1 here, be careful.
Yeah, I know. I think our last ones, Planning Board case number 1813, 1813A, and 1813B.
Linda Louis, planner for the record again. This application is a 3-part request for the annexation, future land use map amendment, and rezoning for a parcel of land located at 4651 45th Street. The 4.16 acre parcel is located on 45th Street, just 5 lots west of North Military Trail in unincorporated Palm Beach County. The property is bounded to the city of Riviera Beach to the north and the city of West Palm Beach to the south and east. Currently, the property is an existing commercial plant nursery. Just one minor correction to the agenda, which specifies that the property is split land use. That is an error. The existing current future land use of the property is county commercial high with an underlying residential density of 5 units to the acre, and the current zoning of the property is county multiple use plan development, which allows for both commercial and residential uses. So just to provide you with a bit of background, the applicant is also owner of 5 separate parcels east of the subject property within the city of West Palm Beach. The intent is to combine the subject property with these parcels for a future commercial redevelopment project. So in order to do this, the first request is the annexation, which is a voluntary annexation request requested by the property owner. The property is also contiguous to the city of West Palm Beach, so no enclaves are being created. And it also complies with Chapter 171 of the Florida statutes, which are the criteria for the voluntary annexation. The second request is for a future land use map amendment, which is required by statutory law for consistency with the annexation. So this slide here depicts the existing and proposed land use of the property. The current future land use, as noted, is commercial high with the underlying 5 units to the acre. The proposed land use is city commercial, which you can see is highlighted in red here. And this proposed land use would be the equivalent to the county's land use designation of commercial high. In terms of evaluating the maximum development potential with the future land use change, the proposed land use of commercial will increase the maximum development potential by 45,000 square feet. As for the level of service analysis to determine if the proposed land use change will increase the demand in public facilities servicing the area and its surroundings, as you can see in this table, all public facilities, with exception to schools, is expected to increase the demand. However, the increase is not expected to cause significant impact that would create any capacity issues for the existing public facilities. So the applicant has provided certification letters from the various public facilities indicating that there is sufficient reserved capacity to accommodate the land use change and the increase in demand. So finally, the third request is for the rezoning of the subject property to a zoning designation that's consistent with the proposed land use of city commercial. This slide depicts the existing zoning of county multiple use plan development, which allows for both commercial and residential uses. And the proposed zoning of the property is city general commercial. Staff has no objection to the proposed rezoning because it is consistent with the land use of commercial, and it's also consistent with the rezoning standards of our city code. In terms of interjurisdictional review, the city has followed the procedure for annexation notification for the county. And on February 15th, a letter from the county had been provided to staff indicating that they did not have any issue with the proposed annexation and that no inconsistencies have been found with Chapter 171 of the Florida statutes. Additionally, all IPARC members had been notified of the future land use map amendment, and to date, the city has not received any inquiries or comments with regards to the land use change. Based on staff's findings and analysis, staff recommends approval of all 3 cases because it does comply with the Florida statutes, the city's comprehensive plan, and the city's zoning and land development regulations. And that concludes staff's presentation.
Okay, any questions of staff? Let me start on this side.
Any hint what they want to do with this?
The applicant is present. I will defer that question to the applicant.
Well, let's finish with you first before we
Okay.
hear from the applicant. Any other questions of staff?
Linda, you or Rick, can the county object to annexations in general principle?
They can if it doesn't meet the criteria of the state statute. However, it has been found consistent with the standards, so there's no reason to object to that.
Any questions on this side? I have one question. Can you put the graphic up showing the proposed change of the land use?
The land use?
Yeah, we had just the blocks there. That's perfect there. Yes. The proposed one there, did you indicate that you think their intention is to combine ultimately
Yes.
that whole thing? So wouldn't that mean they'll be back to try to get the other parcel changed as well?
Yes, eventually they will come back. They have to change the land use for consistency. So yes, it is expected that they come back with another land use amendment.
Are you comfortable with that proposed change? I know that may not be before us, but obviously we're setting it up.
We are very comfortable with it.
All right, then you answered my question. Thank you. Any other questions of staff? If not, the applicant can come forward and be heard.
Good evening. My name's Alan Sicklin. I'm a lawyer in West Palm Beach, and I represent the property owner not only of the site that's subject to this application, but the other property. It totals about 10 acres. And in answer to the question, which is really the important one, what's this going to be when it's all said and done? It's going to be some sort of a planned commercial development. Those of you that drive by there know it's a real mess right now. The plant nursery is, you know, sort of helter-skelter, and that's probably the best parcel of the lot. The gas station at the intersection's been there back to horse and buggy days. It's a mess, and it will go away as well. And the property owner has had some interest from some really good prospective tenants that we've all heard of and will really be an enhancement to the area. So at the end of the day, there will be approximately a 10-acre small quality shopping center in place of what exists now, and we will be back because the gray part of that is industrial. We'll have to replan that, rezone it, and then it'll all be combined into one zoning package with a planned commercial type development. So,
Okay,
if you have
fine.
any questions.
Any questions of the applicant? Let me start on this side. No? Any questions? No. Thank you.
Thank you.
And later, you got to get better on the agenda, so you're not the last one here. All right. I don't think there's anyone from the public other than the applicant here, but there is and wishes to speak. You're afforded the opportunity. If not, we'll bring it back. Any concerns on this application?
None.
If not, we'll look for a motion for approval. You scared Chris from trying it. Okay. That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Okay. You gonna go for it, Mark?
Sure, I move to approve case number 1813.
Second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It passes unanimously.
Okay, I move to approve planning board case number 1813A.
Second.
Motion and a weak second. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously.
I move to approve planning board case number 1813B.
Second.
Motion and second. Spirited second. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Thank you. All right, we then turn to our code revision cases, of which there are none. We go to other business, unfinished business, new business, anything?
There are none?
All right, then we stand adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.